everyone, welcome back to the RMT Women's podcast. And this is probably going to be a bit of a weird video to be filming. We've had the breaking news this morning that Liverpool have been relegated from the WSL. Chelsea have been crowned champions, and Aston Villa will come up next season. I think just firstly, should we just go around and get everyone's immediate thoughts and feelings on the situation? Do you want to kick us off, Amy?
I feel like I've had a bit of time to just sort of okay, because first of all I'd have been all guns blazing and just whatever, but I think being a Liverpool fan, you're bound to feel disappointed, you're bound to feel upset with the situation, especially I can't count the amount of times that we've said this, especially with the amount of games left to play. You can't help but feel hard done by. We were 1 point off the team above. It could have been about 4 different teams at the bottom, but unfortunately it's come to us. But then you've got to look at it on the other hand. We genuinely just weren't good enough, and we should have picked up more points than we did. And as a team, I think they probably deep down know that they should have performed better when they had the opportunity. Unfortunately, the end result opportunity got taken away from us. But it just shows in football you have to take your chances, and you can't rely on your later sort of attempts to brighten up the mistakes you make earlier. So it just shows. But I am really disappointed. I still feel like there should have been a way that we could have finished the league, but that's a fan's perspective, isn't it? So you don't know the logistics behind it. But I think gutted's probably a word that we're going to say a lot during this video.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Chris? What was your immediate thoughts and feelings on it all?
Frustration, overriding frustration was the first one, especially when you read Liverpool's statement and they said that they believe that eventually, or whenever it was safe to do so, they could have fulfilled the fixtures. They believe that there would have been a scenario in that the league could have been finished. Unfortunately, I think a fair few reasons why the decision has been taken have been financial. I think I heard that the figure would have been required for each team to get enough tests to complete the season would have been around £200,000. But when you've got women's teams linked to Premier League clubs, the Championship clubs that are making so much money per year, that's where the frustration kind of comes. Where you'll get clubs that'll spend £1 million or millions of pounds on transfer fees, but then when it comes to a couple of £100,000 to fund the women's team to complete a season, it doesn't seem to be there. And go back to Liverpool, as Amy alluded to, there's a home game against Birmingham, even just for example, one game where against a team above them, 1 point above them, if they won that, they'd have gone above Birmingham. Admittedly, Birmingham still would have played the game less, but that's the kind of tight margins that we're talking about. And with so many games to go, for them, points per game kind of means that there wouldn't have been a definitive change in terms of what was going to happen in the table, and it's a very hard one to stomach that.
Yeah. What about you, Emma? What did you think of it all?
Yeah. God, it's hard to sum up, isn't it? Yeah. I think first, it's massively disappointing for the club, for the players, the staff. So my thoughts go out to all of them, because this must be a really hard time. I mean, especially the likes of, Fernie and obviously the other signings that we got in January to sort of come in, and they essentially signed pledging to kind of help the team battle relegation. And it's obviously not just been them, there has been a turn in form as well, but those arrivals have certainly helped, and basically all of our points have come from January. So when you're kind of starting to pick up points and just starting to get momentum, and there's still 8 games left in the season, which to me is just too much, really, to kind of decide things on. And I've been quite outspoken about this, actually, that I just don't think you can award a title or relegate a team when there is literally 8 games left to play this season. I've really got a feel for Manchester City as well. I mean, they're top of the table.
Yeah.
So Chelsea have obviously got a game in hand, but you're telling the team that is top of the table that they're not champions, and there is still 8 games left to play. And that must be really, really hard for Manchester City, just as it's really hard for these Liverpool players, because, you know, as Chris said, still had Birmingham left to play. Still had, you know, a couple of crucial games left to play. Obviously, we had, you know, the derby that was meant to be at Goodison Park, so there was some tough games in there as well. But there was it's definitely hard, I think, to process when you haven't been given an opportunity to at least try and get yourself out of that position. And I absolutely agree with Amy in the sense that, and a lot of WSL managers have said this, I know Hope Powell's been one of those, where I personally think that the decision to end the WSL season was taken too soon.
Yeah.
Without really, and I do actually think, I'll hold my hands up as someone in the media, like, we and the fan base as well were putting pressure on that decision to be made. So maybe that's something that we have to look at ourselves and go, okay, we probably didn't go about the right way there, because they might have rushed into a decision which I disagree with. But yeah, I mean, it does come down to the finances, it does come down to testing. But as Liverpool said in their statement, they also said it in the previous statement, when the initial announcement of the WSL basically ending was made, that they said then as well that they still felt that they could complete the season, and they're not alone in that. There are clubs that felt that. So for me, that is the most disappointing thing, more than the actual outcome, is the fact that there wasn't an opportunity for these players to play for the things that were still at stake across the whole of the league, not just for Liverpool and relegation. But I just think, like, for you guys, but other fans out there, you know, this is obviously a tough period, but it's a big club, and again, I've been outspoken about this, I want to see more investment in the team. If the club get behind this women's team, then I do truly believe that they can get back to the heights that they used to be at, because you know, there's such a big fan base out there, and there's such a big opportunity there for a club of local size. So keep your heads up, and hopefully that investment will come, and hopefully that push will come, and we'll get some really good recruitment and straight back into the WSL.
Yeah, I think this is like a big like moment for the club as well, because like you said, we need that investment, and if it doesn't come now, it's probably never going to come. There's never going to be a better moment than to invest in this squad. And I know going into the Championship, that might be like a big factor, but like I said on last week's podcast, we'll look at Man United, all the money that they gave their women's team and the players they were able to bring in, that they were able to just shoot right into the top league. Why can't we do that this summer, invest really well, have a really good season next year, and bounce back straight away? Like, that's what you want to see, because Liverpool's a massive club, so why can't we do that?
Yeah, I think the difficulties that are going to really face them now is, obviously, this is going to be a transfer window where not only are Liverpool now being relegated, it's off the back of a pandemic where there is going to be financial crisis. I don't think anyone's going to be in a good position after this. I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we said that. And obviously, you know, the fact that even from the men's side, that, you know, there's obviously been loads of talk on Twitter recently that, you know, they obviously haven't signed Timo Werner because of financial reasons. So clearly, you know, there's going to be financial obstacles there after this pandemic. So recruitment is going to be difficult, and this is something which Liverpool fans need to prepare for now. Yes, there's been a couple of players that have left recently. That's no different to any other WSL club. Every club has been doing that. Their contracts have come to an end. It was not the players' decisions to leave. It was the club didn't want to renew those contracts. So there's a difference there, and that was because they wanted to freshen up the squad. So, you know, players that the club didn't basically feel were going to be part of the club moving on, they didn't offer them contracts in the hope that they would bring in some new blood. That is obviously going to be made a lot more difficult now, because what players are going to come down to the Championship? What players are they going to be able to keep hold of? What quality, what standard of these players that are willing to do that as well? So these are all the challenges that are going to be facing, alongside the fact that they're obviously going to be off the back of a pandemic where there's financial issues. So fans need to be prepared that I'd imagine there will be players leaving, because players are, you know, WSL standard will want to be playing that standard, and they might look to leave, and that's inevitable. That's always going to happen when a club goes down. But hopefully, if they can keep a good nucleus of the squad that they've got now, and still add, and I know they've been working on recruitment anyway, so if they can bring in the players that they were still looking at, and hopefully they can still get those over the line, then yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Emma, to be honest with you, in terms of when a team gets relegated, how much can that change like transfer plans? If you go down, then you are looking at players that want to play in that division, players that are good enough to play in that division, and then with Liverpool's ambition of getting promoted, players that are good enough to stay in the WSL so that they don't need a complete overhaul straight away. And that in itself brings its own challenges. But I think we've seen plenty of examples in the men's and women's game. I know you mentioned Manchester United there, but teams that almost have to get relegated to become better. Now, that being relegated is never it's very rarely a good thing, I guess. But there are teams that have gone down, almost had a renaissance, and come back up and been so much stronger. And that might be almost a kind of best case scenario for Liverpool in terms of how our dire situation looks right now. But again, I think it's important that there is investment. To compare it from an example I've seen firsthand, I cover Everton games, Everton home games for WSL. I've got a good relationship with Billy Kirk, and when you see last season, sorry, doorbell there. When you see last season about just how poor they were, to be honest with you, how poor they were, and I do think Everton were lucky not to get relegated. Obviously, what happened with Yeovil, but Everton, they looked at that situation and thought, right, let's become better. Let's get a better, not just a better squad, a better club, a better women's club. And they've come back this season. They've been so much better. We don't know what's going to happen with the FA Cup, but they're in the quarter-final stage with a home tie against Chelsea. And I know they are desperate to try and at least get to the final of that competition. That's the aim. And that's what Liverpool should be aspiring to. Everton, at the start of the season, said, right, we're going to push up the table. They've done that. They want to get to an FA Cup final. And yeah, I know that it's a game against Chelsea, who are declared champions, but nevertheless, they have a chance of doing that. So there needs to be a genuinely good plan to push this club forward and the finance to back it up. Even, I know a lot's been made about Kirby, and let's just say that they're not included in the plans at this stage, to put it lightly. If the women's team are going to improve, that has to change. Let's be honest about it. That really does have to change, and it would be a sign of starting to properly invest in the women's side.
I feel like there's been a lot of we'll get into some comments that, because we put out a tweet asking people before this, and then we'll run through what some of them are. But I think this is just going to be a massive test of character within the ownership and leadership of Liverpool as a team in general. I think I have been 100% for this whole one team mentality, what Liverpool have tried to implement over this year. But I think now is going to be a test to see whether that was all sort of played up. I don't think it was. I think the intention is there, but the implementation hasn't happened, and I think that's pretty obvious. And I know a lot, and just reading off some things on Twitter. I know Twitter's a horrible place to be at a time like this, but it's almost sometimes good in a way to see if people are reacting the same way as you are, or if you're being too overly not emotional but angry about it. But I've seen a lot of people talking about that, and I definitely think it's going to be a massive test to see whether Liverpool can really pull through with that, because ultimately women's football is a big part of sport now, especially since the World Cup. And I think we said this on the on our podcast last week, that in a way I think the World Cup maybe sort of clouded everyone's judgment of how far the women's game sort of progressed. I think it was sort of a patchwork job, so it covered up the cracks for now, but this pandemic sort of caused everything to kind of come crashing back down again. And we were talking about this off camera before. It's interesting to see the other European leagues, especially obviously the women's Bundesliga. There's shouts that the Bundesliga actually helped fund some of the women's teams. So and I'm thinking a massive corporation like the FA, who get loads of money pumped in, especially from the men's side of things, it's definitely up for debate whether they'd be able to help these teams, because I know a lot of them don't have massive clubs attached to them like Liverpool. It's incredible how polar opposites the men's and the women's team is at the moment, and it's pretty obvious. But the smaller teams, I think, would have struggled. Therefore, maybe that's when the FA could step in and maybe help out a little bit more in that sense. But I definitely agree with what you said before, Emma, that the decision was made really, really early on. Whether they thought of all the options beforehand, like, I don't think we'll ever know that outcome. But I definitely think the decision was made too soon, and it would be interesting to see if they could sort of do it all over again. What the outcome might be.
Well, just to touch on your point about the European leagues, I mean, even the Bundesliga and the women's German league, they've gone out of their way to try and find broadcast deals in other countries to try and promote the women's game whilst it's come back. So that's the level that they've gone to try and help out their women's game.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think like that's, and I agree with Amy when you say about the World Cup sort of overshadowing it. I think from a national point of view, it has grown, like, you know, marketing and everything towards the England team, and that's natural. It's always going to go from the national team downwards, but the WSL is still a hell of a long way to go.
Yeah.
And it's, as I was saying before, that drop from WSL to Championship, like the teams in the Championship, the likes of Sheffield and Durham that are going to be there, they're very, very good teams. That is a tough league. It's a seriously tough league, and there is a hell of a lot more financial challenges in that league as well. So this is absolutely going to be a huge test for Liverpool. But as you also mentioned there, Ames, we're not just talking about an average club in England. This is one of the biggest clubs in England and in world football. And I think this is why, I do think people have been harsh on Liverpool this season in terms of the investment. And I've seen some comments on Twitter where I don't think all of what they're saying is truly representative, because I do think the likes of Peter Moore, etc., they have tried to integrate the women's team more this season. And again, I will emphasise that I absolutely do not think it has been enough, and I still want to see more. But I do think that there were signs of movement being made. Yes, I'd like it to have been quicker, but I think it's not going to help. A hysteria around the club is not going to help anyone. I think the club needs the support of its fan base, and they need people to stick behind them and trust in the club, and that the fact that they will eventually do the right thing. And hopefully, as I said, there was whispers of that happening throughout the season. There was a bit of a feel that they were starting to get a little bit more investment. Obviously, like I said, we made those signings in January. I spoke to Vicky back early March, and she was already telling me then that they were working on recruitment. So it's not like they're just going to be reacting to this. Like, they've had a plan in place. Yes, that will be impacted by the relegation, but hopefully there's foundations there that has been set over the last 6 months. So
yeah, I think it's definitely the club probably has a plan for whatever way it goes. Now that's like set in stone where we're going to be next season. It's going to be a lot easier over the next few months to sort of, like you say, there might be players that we've contacted who might not want to play for a Championship club, and there more likely will be, and you've got to understand the reasoning. So if those players don't want to come, then you can now turn your attention to other players who may be more willing to come and help you, next season. So it's definitely, although it's probably the worst possible news, it's a good time for the club to now wrap their head around things and say, right, well, this is what we need to do. This is what needs to happen over the next 12 months. This is a plan that we've now got, because you're not just going to plan for the next 3 months. You're going to plan for the next year, because this time next year you're going to want to be in a completely different position than you are at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that kind of clean slate thing and this is what I've been trying to kind of get across about the contracts and the players that have left. And I think that's what it all comes down to, is that they're trying to build a team for the future So the players that they've let go, that they don't think that they'll form that nucleus for the team going forward. So it's not like they've just gone, let's pull all of our squad. They haven't done that at all. They've tried to just players who have come to the end of their contracts, and that's another thing. Like, you don't know when football's going to return for WSL, so they don't want to be sort of handing out new contracts to players that they're not fully on board with anyway, and then they might not play for another 6 months. Like, the financial strain is already going to be tough. So I would definitely, and I think this is what we fans need to be prepared for. I would definitely expect to see a couple more leave the club. And the difference now is that whereas before it was the club's decision to end, to not offer new contracts, there's probably going to be hard decisions now where players have to make decisions themselves, and that's what's going to be difficult. And that's where the club really they're going to have to fight to try and keep hold of these better players. But it's inevitable. You're going to lose your best players.
Just kind of like open up to all three of you. Like, to what extent? I know we said about them making a decision too soon. One reason why I think that might be the case is that we have no idea, as you mentioned there, Emma, we've got no idea when next season is going to start. So how can it be called off so early when you don't know when it's going to get back underway in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was more the fact that, like, if obviously, the whole, and I think the amount of times we've already mentioned this word, but financial strain.
Yeah.
That's the annoying thing, is that it all comes down to the fact that, the men's Premier League has got money. So they're playing football. That league's going to be absolutely fine. I was just desperate to see the FA step in and provide a bit of money for WSL. That was what I wanted to see. And that is the overriding factor of all of this, is that there wasn't enough money to do it.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there would have been a way. And, the fact that Liverpool mentioned it in their statement, I think some of the clubs that were backed by Premier League clubs, I reckon, if they were given a choice, I think they might have been willing to, individual clubs put in some money, and then the FA, I don't know, total, add up the total. I don't know the ins and outs of the financial side, but I do know that there was clearly a will from a lot of players and a lot of teams to carry on the league, and it basically came down to financial reasons that it didn't.
It might just be a case of the fact that, like, clubs wouldn't have been able to afford testing on a weekly basis for all players, all staff members at the facilities. But I think, did you mention before, because it was like £200,000 something like that?
Yeah, a rough total, like, per club.
Yeah, so that probably to a men's team like Liverpool or like Man City or Chelsea is not a lot for them.
One or two players' wages.
Yeah.
Literally one player's wages for a week, that's not a lot of money to them. So, like you just said, if I don't think that was just the one factor. There's obviously other factors that have come into play cancelling the league, but if that was one thing that could have been resolved, then you'd like to think that a lot of clubs would have been able to step in, like the men's teams, in order to take that financial strain off, just to get that one thing sorted. But then, like you say, you look at likes of like Bristol with their men's team have been able to do that, Birmingham and all stuff like that. There's just loads of different factors, and I don't know. I think it's just more like the way that we've all said was frustration. Like, I think it's just going to take a couple of days for us all to like wrap our heads around it, and to be able to think like properly about what's the next step for women's football in England.
Yeah, because I think Birmingham, I mean, their men's team have had financial issues. It's well documented that, but that's where you'd arguably be asking for the FA to kind of step in and help them out.
Yeah.
But then they'd be making a case where. Yeah.
I feel like it's an all or nothing. It can't just be one or two teams that can provide it. It's got to be every single team sort of thing. Otherwise, I feel it's an unfair playing field, isn't it? And that's definitely something that they've looked into. A lot of people that have written into us have been talking about like the lack of investment. That just seems to be the one pinpointed reason as to why this has sort of happened. And I feel like everything that we've said today has probably been revolved around that. Like, I think it's very obvious, and it's been thrown up a lot and a lot of times about Liverpool's investment in their women's team, and I think a lot of people, including myself, like once now I've had a bit of time to think about it. At the end of the day, trying to look at it on the most possible positive way. That was really hard to say. Most positive possible way. There we go.
It's a tough one.
It is. It's a tongue twister, that. Trying to look at it positively. Like, obviously, this is what it is now. We've got to accept it. We've got to now sort of look forward, and then maybe this might just be that tiny push, that leap of faith that Liverpool needed, in order to sort of sit down and go, look, this is embarrassing. Like, it, like however many years ago now, probably not even 10 years ago now, we were back-to-back champions. Do you know what I mean? And now we're facing relegation with a team, in all fairness, that shouldn't really be anywhere near the bottom. You look at some of the players that we've got, and especially those that came in January, as Emma said earlier, they genuinely changed the game for us. But unfortunately, the damage had already been done in the first part of the season, and it's just highly unfortunate. But I definitely think that now we need to not dwell on it. Maybe the next few days we can sort of curl up on the sofa and have a bit of a cry, but definitely it's now about, okay, well, what are we going to do next season? Like, what we're going to do to make this situation better, like whether that is getting new people in and still having that pull, or whatever it's going to be. It's definitely about moving forward, and I hope the worst thing would be the fans turning on the club completely. I think that's not going to be a great situation for anyone if that turns out to be something that happens.
I think you made a good point there, Ace, about the players not performing. So, like, there's definitely, at the start of the season, the players that were in that squad should not have been bottom come January. Like, there was players that didn't perform to the level that they should have been, and they've held their hands up and they've said that. So yes, there's a lack of investment, a lack of recruitment, because a club the size of Liverpool should be competing with the likes of City, Chelsea, United, Everton now up there. That is absolutely true. But I do think there has to be some kind of ownership on the actual performances as well, which they just weren't good enough from, whether that's down to the coaching staff, whether that's down to the players. Everyone in that squad held their hands up and said, we haven't been good enough. So, and this is where I think, I definitely want to see more investment. I've been really disappointed in the past, but the last 6 months I've been less disappointed, because I've seen a reaction to that where they got themselves into this position, and I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter recently from other journalists as well, saying that Liverpool have only got themselves to blame because they're in this position at the bottom of the table, and I agree to some extent. But then I also think in the last couple of months they've started to turn that around. I think we've got 5 points in basically the last couple of games, so it's like sorry, not 5 points, but
there was improvement. There definitely was improvement, and that's what I think that's what's going to get overclouded by this situation. But on the other hand, it's true what they say. You need to set the tone of the season right from the get go.
Absolutely, and that's where I agree. I'm like, yes, they are to blame for the position that they're in. Any team that's bottom of the table is bottom of the table for a reason.
Exactly, yeah.
But I do think that the fact that there has been changes since January showed that the club was starting to realise that, and I think that's what I think is the disappointing thing. I guess from my point of view is that we'll never know whether that was going to pay off, because they weren't given an opportunity.
That first half performance against Arsenal in Chester, that was kind of the performance that I've been waiting for all season, wasn't it? Because that performance in the first half was the most aggressive I've seen the team all season. They got in Arsenal's faces. They scored 2 goals. The 2 goals that they conceded were really sloppy. It was where you've scored 2 great goals, you conceded 2 that you really shouldn't be conceding. But as I say, we wait until best part of the season gone and to see that kind of aggression in a display, to see that kind of performance against a team with some of the best players in the world.
Yeah.
So then perform against teams like, say the West Ham game where they conceded 4. Games like that where you're thinking, because I remember looking at that game thinking that could be one, that could be another one, just to get another win, put themselves a bit further clear, and then going 4-0 down, and eventually ended 4-2, and it's just kind of, what happened? How can you perform like that against two teams?
I think that sort of sums it up, doesn't it? Is the fact that those players, they were the same players essentially, with a couple of new additions. They were the same players from the start of the season. The only thing that changed was obviously I think people also forget that the coaching staff all came in, were completely new. Took over a squad that Matt Beard had essentially brought. Neil Redfern had brought, obviously after the Matt Beard era, and then he then left, and then you've then got the coaching staff coming in with players that they didn't recruit, that they don't really know much about. So there has to be a period there where they get to know the squad, they get to know the players. They definitely outlive that period in the sense that you have a bit of a stage where you're like, okay, we'll let them off the hook, and obviously they went beyond that period where they were just not performing to the level that they should have been. But I do think you have to take that into consideration, because then your recruitment process, you're playing catch up, aren't you? Because you're essentially getting rid of players that don't fit the mold of how you want to play, or that don't fit the style of coaching that you're trying to implement. You're learning as a squad, you're learning as a coaching staff, and all at the same time, it's a club that isn't well invested in the women's team, as other clubs are. So there's difficulties there as well. So then when it then comes to January, again, limited funds, but we made some good recruitments in January, and things start to turn around. So that's when you think, that performance against Arsenal, the performance against Chelsea in the FA Cup, performance against Man City as well, at the City ground away. Obviously only that 1-0 defeat with a late header from Gemma Bonner, and it's like those performances showed that there was potential in that squad. Yes, potential wasn't good enough, definitely needed better players in, but it was starting to get there. I think that's the thing.
We always just needed that little bit more, didn't we?
Yeah. We'll sort of finish off. We'll just take a few comments. Like, I actually can't believe how many we've got. There's actually loads. One here from Swell. Need to be backed properly. Need to rebuild and focus efforts from the main club. Need to be back where we should be champions. Better facilities, a more suitable ground needed. Could have been a different outcome had our games before Corona been played. Which I think
absolutely agree.
A fair point. I don't even think we met 75% of games played this season, which is just mind-baffling. We basically had a quarter left to play, which is just phenomenal.
Pretty much just over half, wasn't it, really? But every team had between 6 and 9 games left.
Yeah. Liverpool had 8 games.
It's such a big chunk.
Another one here from LFC Post 6. Very hard to take, being only a point behind Birmingham, with so many games left. I think PPG is fairer than null and void, but it does reward teams who've played fewer games. Just hoping that this will bring about change, because it's definitely needed.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It's pretty much what we said.
When I was looking at this earlier in terms of PPG, and I think one of the arguments, if we go a bit broader than Liverpool here, for leagues from step 3 downwards that have been null and voided, their argument now is, well, why didn't you just wait for us and PPG us in terms of promotion? Certainly looking at promotion, maybe the relegation teams not so much, but even just that, keeping it fair up and down the ladder. It's
gonna definitely take a few days to sort of sink in, and then we'll obviously, it's just about pushing on now, really, isn't it? There's nothing we can do, nothing anyone can do anymore. Like, the decision is final. So, but that is an interesting point, whether the leagues that they stopped so early on, they'll probably be feeling a bit hard done by. But
absolutely,
definitely. And I think those comments that you read out as well sort of sum up the whole overriding thing, is that the club needs more investment. It needs more backing. It needs a good recruitment policy, and then hopefully then it'll only be upwards and onwards, but only time will tell.
Exactly. And in all fairness, Liverpool aren't the only team that have lost out. Arsenal is a big one who've been pretty much thrown to the curb. I mean, because they were still in with a chance of winning too. I mean, we're talking about 8 games here, so and then even if you're looking at the team,
the table.
exactly.
No.
If you're even looking at teams in the league below, Sheffield United, for example, they still had a chance. So there's going to be a lot of unhappy people with the decision. But as we said, that decision's already been made. There's not much more we can do about it.
Sheffield United, if you look at the Continental Club group from earlier in the season, Liverpool, I know Villa obviously got promoted now, so Liverpool wouldn't be playing them next season, but they can kind of use that as a bit of a barometer, certainly the coaching staff, in terms of what they'll be facing the league, certainly in terms of Sheffield United, who obviously won at Prenton Park, and they'll be looking to challenge Liverpool next season as well.
Yeah.
So that's what Liverpool will be up against.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure we'll have a bit more to say on things next week. I'm sure a lot of feelings will come out over the next couple of days about players. Clubs will have more say in it over the next couple of days. So keep all sleep with that. But thanks for joining us, Chris and Emma. Pleasure as always. It's this topic to talk about.
What a good day,
sorry,
hey?
I look terrible as well.
What a great day. In a few years' time, once Liverpool are back in the league, we'll be laughing about this.
Yeah, we'll do a rewatch of this.
We'll be like, why were we so serious?
I'm just going to go and drink a bottle of rum. So
nice.
I'm going to do that.
Friday night, why not, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Well, thank you everyone for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And we'll see you all next time with a new video.